The anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary. Oops. There. All right, we just did the posterior pituitary. Now let's concentrate on the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is glandular tissue, not neural. So the connection between the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary is going to be vascular. All right, so these two parts are connected by two capillary beds. Two capillary beds connected together is called a portal system. So we've got one capillary bed that's up here in the hypothalamus, and then a capillary bed that's here in the anterior pituitary, and they are connected like so. So this is a portal system. Again, a portal system is two capillary beds that are connected, and this is the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. So the anterior pituitary makes its own hormones, but they are secreted due to the influence of the hypothalamus. So we remember from looking at the posterior pituitary that we saw a couple of nuclei. And one of them was called the supraoptic nucleus, and the other one was the paraventricular. Okay, and we know that they had their axons going down into the posterior pituitary. In the anterior pituitary, we also utilize nuclei. So we're going to see the paraventricular nucleus again, and then two other nuclei. So we've got the preoptic nucleus, over there, preoptic nucleus, and then the arcuate nucleus. So you remember that in the posterior pituitary, the two hormones that secrete from the posterior pituitary were ADH and oxytocin, and they were synthesized in these nuclei, the supraoptic nucleus and the paraventricular nucleus in the hypothalamus. And then those hormones then were stored in the axon terminals of these neurons. That does not happen here, but the hormones are made in these nuclei. But instead of being stored in the axons and going down into the anterior pituitary, they are secreted into this capillary bed, and then they flow from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary from the vessels in those two capillary beds from one to the other. All right, so there are 6 hormones that come from the anterior pituitary, and they are released by releasing hormones in the hypothalamus. So if we look at the first one, we'll look at ACTH. Okay, so ACTH is adrenocorticotropic hormone. And it is stimulated to be secreted from the releasing hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone. Or CRH. Of course, it's coming from the hypothalamus. So it comes down here. Let's do it this way. It comes down here and it goes into the capillary bed where it is stimulates a cell called a corticotropic cell. And this cell then secretes ACTH. ACTH, its target is the adrenal cortex. And its main hormone that it causes to release is cortisol. All right, the next hormone is TSH. Let's do that a different color. TSH, so thyroid stimulating hormone. It also comes down and stimulates a cell called a thyrotrope, and that secretes TSH into the blood. Thyroid stimulating hormone is stimulated by TRH, which is thyroid releasing hormone. So that comes from, of course, the hypothalamus. Its target is the thyroid gland. And it stimulates the release of T3 and T4. Okay, which we'll talk more about that later. So T3 and T4. All right, the next one is going to be, growth hormone. So growth hormone comes from growth hormone releasing hormone. So this is growth hormone. Comes from growth hormone releasing hormone, GRH, from the hypothalamus. So it secretes growth hormone. Growth hormone's target is most body cells, but more specifically skeletal cells, or the skeleton, and muscle cells for growth. Okay. It also, that growth hormone releasing hormone comes from the hypothalamus, and it stimulates a somatotrope, which secretes the growth hormone. All right, the next one is, or the next two are FSH and LH. So FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. LH is luteinizing hormone. And they are secreted, or they are released from the hypothalamus from gonadotropic releasing hormone. And that stimulates gonadotrope that will secrete FSH and LH. So their targets are the gonads, and they stimulate the release of testosterone and estrogen. And they, of course, start sperm formation and follicle formation to make an ovum. All right, the last one is going to be prolactin. So prolactin is a little bit different. So there's still a sort of a releasing hormone that goes down to a lactotrope. But instead of a releasing hormone, it is an inhibitory hormone. PIH, so prolactin inhibitory hormone from the hypothalamus inhibits the release of prolactin in normal circumstances. So the only time it stops sending the prolactin inhibitory hormone is after pregnancy, when it is time to provide milk for the baby. Okay. So those are all the releasing hormones from the hypothalamus, and those are all the stimulatory hormones from the anterior pituitary. So the anterior pituitary, again, synthesizes its own hormones. Excuse me. Synthesizes its own hormones, but only release them or secrete them when they are told to from getting releasing hormones from the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus has complete control here.